Hello, it is I, Dr. Brian Lorgon 111, coming at you again with more of Vanilla Swirl developer commentary. And today we're going to get down pretty deep into nitty-gritty of some of the code details of how I coded up Vanilla Swirl CTM. But before we jump into the code, the first thing I want to talk about is finding caves near spawn. All of these glowstone pillars that you see throughout the map in Vanilla Swirl are basically designed to show you where there are cave entrances, places where the player may want to head downstairs in order to find interesting things, whether they be silverfish blocks or whether they be dungeon spawners or iron and gold and coal in the walls or all those types of things. And so the question is, how do we write an algorithm that can find cave entrances so that we can mark them with the glowstone pillar like this so that they're easily visible from a distance? And it turns out that it's non-trivial. The basic idea is pretty straightforward and simple, which is suppose we're in a cave system down here. I have a night vision effect going on, but obviously it's dark down here. There's skeletons spawning and whatever. And yeah, suppose we're in some airspace marked by this glass block that happens to be underground and isn't visible to any sunlight. If we want to kind of like find the whole cave and find any of its entrances, one can imagine doing the moral equivalent of a 3D flood fill algorithm, which is we start from one location and we go one space in every direction. Up, down, left, right, top, and bottom. And if it's still air, we kind of keep going. And I'm getting my head kind of caught on the sides here. So we do this, and then from each of those places, we continue to kind of like move out in some other direction, so long as we're in air, just trying to find kind of all of the connected airspace of the cave. And eventually, as we come out, we will start finding places where we get above the height map. The height map in Minecraft is for every XZ value, that is for everything along this axis and this axis, not counting the height. It tells you the highest block that has direct sunlight visible on it. And so, for example, the height map on this block right here would actually be right here. This is like the first solid block that isn't visible to sunlight because things like grass do not filter sunlight, and so the sunlight goes directly through it. And so over here, that block, I guess let me actually get some dirt in my inventory, or some grass. That block is kind of like the location of the height map for this particular XZ coordinate. But down here, you know, this block right here is where the height map is here because the sunlight shining down all the way down to here, but over here it's only shining up on this block. And so the cave system, we could imagine kind of flood filling the glass up to the point to where it first gets out, peeking out from beyond the height map, and that's going to be kind of like the edge or the entrance of a cave system. And so that's the idea of the algorithm in terms of trying to find the various edges of a cave system that then go and poke out. And so points like this would be kind of the edge of the cave system, and as we're flood filling and kind of coming out here, these would be the first points that were then above the height map. But something we'll notice right here already is I had some points here that get above the height map and seem to be like an entrance to the cave. But just a few blocks away over here, there's also entrances to the same cave system, because cave systems actually tend to be pretty connected in Minecraft. And if I go into spectator mode and just go underground so that we can see kind of like all the cave systems, there's, you know, caves running all around here, and there's a big ravine over here, and caves kind of snaking everywhere. And so which of these caves are connected and which of them are not connected to each other, and how many of them might have like 10 or 20 different entrances back up to the surface in a variety of different locations, and do I want to mark all of them? And so these are the types of decisions I had to make in order to come up with my particular algorithm. So you'll recall from last time that we had kind of this main algorithm that was an overview of all the different things that the Vanilla Swirl algorithms do. And last time we talked about treeify, remove trees near spawn, place teleporters, double spawners, and substitute blocks. And so today, the first thing we're going to talk about is find cave entrances near spawn. And so the code starts out pretty simply like this. We're basically going to search in the area of the daylight radius, so a minimum and maximum value from the negative daylight radius to the positive one in the x and z axis. And on the y-axis, just as a heuristic, I'm going to be searching from a y minimum of 20 up to a y height of 80, looking for cave entrances. And I'm going to set a y depth of 50 as kind of my threshold for what makes an interesting cave. Basically, I don't want to mark shallow little caves where there's a cave entrance on the surface that goes down 20 blocks and then just kind of dead ends. And so that's one of my threshold values that I'm going to use. And I talked about it being kind of a 3D flood fill algorithm. The actual efficient algorithm is a union find algorithm, which is an efficient way to find connected components. And I'm not going to go into the details of that bit of the code. Oh, and one thing to notice already, this particular function, find cave entrances near spawn, takes a couple of arguments, hm, which is the height map, and hm ignoring leaves and logs, which I want to talk about in a little bit more detail. So when I was first writing code for this, one of the things I had to debug, I'm going to throw a screenshot up on the screen. This is a screenshot I took back in November when I was first developing this, because the underground cave green beacon kind of algorithm was one of the first things I worked on. And basically, this shows one of my early prototypes trying to place the glowstone pillar at the entrance to a cave. And I had added some debugging output because I couldn't figure out why my glowstone pillars were getting placed in nonsensical locations, such as at the corner of a forest where there wasn't any cave entrance. And so I added debugging output that changed everything that it thought was the cave to glass blocks, kind of like I was just showing on the screen when we were playing in-game. And you can see the problem, which is that it picks everything that's below the height map as kind of quote-unquote underground and part of the cave. And in this case, there was a roofed forest, and so there were all these connected bits of, airspace that were under the height map because they were underneath the canopy of these tree leaves. And so I realized that as far as the player is concerned, and as far as any human would consider what constitutes being underground in a cave entrance, I needed to ignore leaves. And so I ended up starting to have height map that ignored leaves. And so I was computing my own height map that even though the sunlight, can't penetrate directly through the leaves, it's still the case that we should consider those above ground and only consider things that are actually, below solid blocks as being below the height map. So this is one of the first things I had to contend with. There's a lot of different things I had to contend with in order to make this algorithm any good. So I've spared you the details of the union find algorithm that actually finds all of the airspace connected components. But at this point now, we have near spawn cave entrances, CCs. CCs are connected components. Each one is a hash set of all of the airspace values. And so basically all the X, Y, Z coordinates, each point in the cave is considered an individual kind of entity. And so one of the first heuristics I had was to make sure that the count is greater than 200. So we only consider caves of some minimum size. And that was because sometimes, even with the threshold of Y going below 50, sometimes you'd have a cave that, goes straight down and then just kind of dead ends. And so even if it goes below 50, it still might be kind of a very short, small cave. And so I wanted to ignore those. And then another issue I had was sometimes when there was a ravine, there would be lots of points that were below the height map. And we'll actually see kind of a different example of this in just a moment. But most of them are just on the very edge, the very fringe of the ravine. And there weren't actually any caves there. It was just there's a bunch of little overhangs in the ravine. And so all the points below that were considered below the height map and so part of a cave system. And so what I ended up doing in order to filter those out is taking a look at the sunlight, which is the skylight array. And so I get the skylight values, and anything that has a skylight value greater than 12, I count that as points near the sunlight, and then I ignore all the points near the sunlight. And so anything that doesn't have sun shining directly on it, but does just a couple of blocks away, let's ignore all of those values as well. And as a result, that way we will not see a deep ravine that's exposed to the air as something that it thinks is a cave, but isn't actually a cave. And then there's some code to actually write the glowstone pillar once we found it. It's a function that I'm going to actually call later, but it basically tries to figure out kind of like the bottom and top heights of where it should actually draw the pillar. And that's not particularly interesting. I'm back in Minecraft just to show the ravine thing that I wanted to show off, because I'm not sure that I explained it all that well. But if you only consider the height map, then here's a point on the height map. And so basically the algorithm is going to see all of these spaces as quote unquote being inside a cave, because it's spaces below the height map that are, big air spaces. But in fact, what this is just a giant ravine that's open to the ground. And this all has, sunlight, skylight level of 15 or whatever. And so basically, by only considering places that have a certain amount of darkness, with skylight going down to at least a level of 12, rather than finding all of these little points hanging on the side of the ravine that aren't actually what a human would consider a cave, instead, if we have to go to a light level of 12, I guess I can see it over here. Light is 15. You can see right over here. 15 sky, 0 block. And if I start flying into the cave, 14, 13, 12, 11, here's where it actually gets dark in the cave. Once again, I've got night vision, and so everything looks bright on the screen. But basically, as a result, I'll only consider, somewhere around here as being the boundary of what begins the cave, and I'll ignore all these other points that are below the height map. And so that ends up doing the right thing in order to find cave entrances, by considering this kind of like the mouth of an actual cave and ignoring all these other points that are below the height map. So in any case, something I'm about to show with some more code on the screen is then, once we've kind of made those considerations, then we end up with some cave entrances in the ravine. There's like a cave entrance over here and a cave entrance over here, and these are going to end up being connected. But then when we have these cave entrances in the ravine that are a few spots away from the actual place that's above the height map, where we'd actually try to put a glowstone pillar on the surface, and these things are connected, you end up with the question of, okay, if there's a variety of different cave entrances to connected caves that are all here, where do you actually want to place a glowstone pillar? Because I could place one kind of above this cave entrance, somewhere over here. I could place one above this cave entrance, somewhere over here. Or, if there's other caves, it looks like there's another cave down here, and so it might be appropriate to put one somewhere over here. And so it's the case that I don't want to label every cave entrance, because there might be a whole cluster of cave entrances to a connected cave system in one area. And so I want to kind of like pick only one. And the one that I want to pick, I try to pick the one actually. Yeah, this will be better if we go back to spawn and take a look at some of the things that we were looking at originally, like back over here. There was a cave entrance over here, and there was a cave entrance over here, but they're part of the same connected cave system, and, I could just, see where they're connected right here and here. And so if I only want to pick one representative entrance to highlight, rather than have a pillar here and a pillar here, and if there's another little entrance over here and here, where it's all just a bunch of different entrances to one cave system, I just want to pick one of them. And so I'm going to choose to pick the one that is nearest to spawn. And so in this case, this one is closer than this one. And so I'm going to choose this one to actually mark with the glowstone pillar. And then I won't bother marking this one, because once you found this entrance and walked in, you'll be in the same cave as this one. So I don't need to kind of redundantly mark this. So basically, I have the heuristic of choosing the entrance that's nearest to spawn in order to choose the best entrance. But then, even when you do something like that, if I go back to this crazy ravine, suppose we're in this ravine, and there's a cave over here and a cave over here. Once again, even though these are considered the actual dark spots that are cave entrances, all of this is airspace that is underneath the height map in various locations. And so all of this will be, kind of like one connected cave. And there's even spots that go over here under the height map and go over here under the height map. And I guess this part is actually completely underground. And so the last place that things might be staying underneath the height map is like right over here. And then when you finally come out to here, you're above the height map. And so suppose, in this particular ravine, it's not the case because I'm actually reaching the world border over here. But suppose spawn was right over here, and I'm trying to figure out where to mark these cave entrances. I don't want to accidentally decide that, hey, the point that is in part of this connected airspace that is closest to spawn is right here, because right here is part that gets us into quote-unquote the cave, the part that's underneath the height map, that then gets me to one of these cave entrances. And so I want to make sure that I'm only marking glowstone pillars kind of quote-unquote next to the points that actually are part of the dark part of the cave, like over here or over here, and not that are part of the total part of the cave that's everywhere underneath the height map over here, because I originally didn't have anything to check for the dark spaces, and I ended up with glowstone pillars over here that basically said, hey, look, there's a ravine here. And the player would come down here, and they would look around, and they would see that there's a ravine, and they'd be like, there's no cave here. And they'd look over here, and they'd be like, there's no cave here. And they'd, possibly glance over here and not see the cave. And so, yeah, basically the ideal is I would like to have a glowstone pillar that's here, marking the actual cave entrance that's here, or here, that's marking actual cave entrance that's over here, and not over there on the other side of the ravine. Ravines kind of really muck up a lot of the algorithms that I was trying to do. And it could be the case that there is a cave entrance, like, say, this one over here that we were just looking at, and a different cave entrance, like, say, this one over here, that end up actually being connected underground if you, like, travel through 1,200 blocks of cave system in order to get there and take all the correct turns. But as far as the player is concerned, they're effectively like separate caves, because it's usually the case that players don't explore for more than 500 or 600 blocks through any particular cave system before kind of like ending a caving outing. I guess people will kind of like explore for different amounts of time, but usually by then you'll have found a dungeon or something and need to like go home and fill up your inventory or put things back in chests or re-gear or do different things like that. And so it's the case that I don't actually want to mark all of the distinct cave systems, but if cave system entrances are far enough apart from one another, I want to treat them as distinct, even though they might be part of one connected system. Because it's not on this seed, but have seen other seeds where basically it looks like there's 12 distinct cave entrances over like a 300 radius area, and it turns out that they're all part of the same cave system underground, but you have to travel like 2,000 blocks to get from one end to the other. And rather than just having one glowstone pillar that's like there's only one cave in this world, like you want to have different cave entrances so that people can explore a little bit of each and discover different things. So all of that was a lot of long-winded prelude just to explain this bit of code, which are a few other heuristics I used to filter out what otherwise might be quote-unquote distinct entrances or add some more distinct entrances to cave systems. And so the first portion of the code up here, distinct entrances, is going to be filtered by the ones that have darkness nearby. And so that's what I was showing with the ravine. And rather than considering just every point below the height map, I only want to mark distinct entrances as points above the height map that also have some darkness nearby, so that we're actually going deep into a cave and aren't just kind of like at the edge of a ravine. And so that's kind of like the first half of the block of the code here, is just trying to filter out only those that have darkness nearby. And then on the other side, I basically want to take a look at all the distinct entrances that a single cave system has, but only count ones that are a certain distance away from others, so that the player might think that they're a distinct cave, but they're actually, connected, but it might be like 1,000 blocks away. And so I've got a threshold number of 200 at the very top of this code, and it's just, heuristically picking something. But basically, I will find the distinct entrance. I'll start out by finding the one that's nearest spawn to find the original glowstone pillar to place, and then I'll go through the caves and try to travel to the other distinct entrances, and if it's less than 200 blocks away, then I'm just going to filter it out and say, you know what, we've already marked this cave, and I don't need to have an entrance right here and then an entrance just a few blocks over that's going to connect to the same cave in less than 200 blocks. But if it's over a particular threshold, then I'm going to put a new glowstone pillar there and say, you know what, the player is going to think that this might be a separate cave system, and so we'll put a glowstone pillar there. and it just kind of iterates over the algorithm doing like that until it eventually either filters out distinct entrances because they were too close to other ones, or has marked them with glowstone pillars. Wow, I can't believe I just spent 20 minutes talking about a single function in the code, but it actually is really complicated, or there were a lot of complicated things to discover in order to get it to the current state of where it is. Backing up in terms of the big picture, and by the way, if you're still listening, thank you. I know I didn't do the best job explaining all of that. Backing up to the big picture, the whole point of doing all of this, the whole point of marking the cave entrances in the first place, is twofold. One is when you first start the map, like in one of the starting books, like it tells you about getting started and says you need to do some caving near spawn to get resources. And I told people they need to do caving near spawn to get resources. I know from experience, both in my own play and from watching people play Minecraft Bingo, that there are lots of times that you will want to find a cave so you can go downstairs and get some iron, for example. And sometimes you run around in Minecraft and just can't manage to find a cave entrance. And so what people end up doing is digging down. And even one of my beta testers, like back when I was first testing the map in February, I said, do some caving near spawn. And some people just dug a mine because that's how a lot of people play Minecraft. And it's like, I need to get resources. Okay, I'm going to dig straight down right here. And eventually I'll come across some iron and coal and other things. Okay, I'm happening not to find any right here. But that's what somebody did. And yeah, and that's how some people play Minecraft. And I don't want people to do that, not because I don't want them to get the resources that way, but because one of the reasons I want them to go caving, well, two of the reasons I want them to go caving. One is so that they will discover that stone has been turned into silverfish, and so this is indeed like a hostile world that is out to kill you. And the other reason is so that they will find one of these dungeon spawners where they will find the book that says after gearing up and tell them about what to do next, as well as getting some good loot. And dungeons in Minecraft only generate next to airspace. They only generate as part of caves. They don't just generate kind of like, in solid ground. Like there's solid ground over here, and there wouldn't just be a random dungeon right here. And so I want people to go caving. And so I'm trying to do everything possible to encourage them to go caving. And so I want to make it very easy for them to actually find a cave system that they can go hop into and end up, fighting some skeletons and having a creeper explode and turning things into silverfish, and eventually going through this cave system and finding, one of the many dungeons that is down connected to these various cave systems, so that they will find this good gear as well as the book that then gets them on the path and tells them that after they're geared up, they need to go looking for the green beacon. And so the whole point of marking the cave entrances is so that I get people into the caves, finding the silverfish, finding the dungeons, so that they can continue on with the map. And yeah, it just turns out that doing a halfway decent job of marking what a human would obviously consider a cave entrance is a very hard thing to do algorithmically. And I hope I've at least given you a sense of some of the problems of trying to specify the algorithms for figuring out where is the best place to mark a glowstone pillar for a cave entrance. In any case, that's all I'm going to talk about today because I've been too long-winded. In the next episode, we'll actually talk about the algorithms for the dungeons, which are both more complicated and in some sense simpler. And so hopefully that'll go better than this did. I hope, as always, that you guys are having a great day, and I appreciate all the comments of people who've said that they've been enjoying this series and hearing about the design rationale and trying to understand some of the algorithms in the code. And so I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. For now, bye-bye.